if you learn this concept, no jazz standard is ever going to be a mystery for you. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, guys. I want to talk about a very important topic here, which is probably my favorite topic. It's the harmonic universe of jazz. This concept was first introduced to me at Berklee when I was getting my undergrad in composition and jazz guitar. This is from a book from Berklee Press called Jazz Composition Theory and Practice by an amazing player-composer, Ted Peace. This book is the best, and I highly recommend you buying it and checking it out because this is probably the best book for composition out there in the world. All right, guys, in order to understand what the harmonic universe is, we have to understand certain basic aspects of this concept. For example, how chords are built in this concept. If you take the scale and you skip every note, you will get a triad. For example, instead of going C, D, E, F, G, you go C, skip D, go to E, skip F, go to G. Get a triad. Now you do that again for one more note, you get your seventh chords. Now, if you repeat the same concept with every note in the key of C major, you'll get all these chords. C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, right? G7, A minor 7, B minor 7, flat 5, C major 7. Now let's go into a little bit of a detail. There's only one dominant chord, which is on the 5th degree. G7. I love that sound. Right? The point of this chord is to resolve, take us back to C. It's also important to understand that a lot of popular music, all the way from Beatles to the Beach Boys, to jazz standards, to things you hear in musicals, use a concept called secondary dominance. Now, secondary dominants are dominant chords that are not in the key. They're actually borrowed to resolve to all the other chords in the key. For example, C major 7 to D minor 7. I can play an A7 chord to resolve to D minor. That's a 5 chord of 2 in the key of C major. Now, if I use that same concept, I get A7 to D minor, B7 to E minor, C7 to F major, right? D7 to G7, E7, A minor, C sharp minor 7, F sharp 7 to B minor 7 flat 5, which resolves back to C. Once you understand this concept, you can also understand the idea of using these chords or these dominant chords as first inversion. You can also use them as just triad, but the first inversion sounds beautiful because it creates a chromatic passing harmony. For example, C major, A chord with C sharp in the bass, D minor, B with D sharp in the bass, E minor, C with E in the bass, F major, D with F sharp in the bass, G7, E with G sharp in the bass, A minor. You know, all of these chords create a chromatic harmony, which is very, very beautiful. Now we can go to the next concept, which is related twos. The concept of related twos is very common in jazz. What that basically means is if you have a dominant chord, you can get a related two of that dominant chord in that key. Sounds confusing? Let me explain. Now this chord, G7, can have a related two. And what that means is basically this chord resolves to C major. So it comes from the key of C major. Now the 2 chord in the key of C major is D minor. Goes to G7, resolves to C major 7. Now that creates a very beautiful resolved sound, also called as 2-5-1 in jazz. Now the idea is all these different secondary dominant chords that you have can have a related 2, which means that if I have an A7, A7 is actually the 5 chord in the key of D major. That means the 2 chord is E. E minor 7, A7, D minor. Now what we have is C major, right? E minor, A7, D minor, F sharp minor, B7, E minor 7, G minor 7, C7, F major, A minor, D7, G7, B minor, 7 flat 5 or B minor 7, E7, A minor, C sharp minor, F sharp, B minor 7 flat 5 to C major. Now already you have a lot of chords going on. Now you can use them in many variations as you want. You can use the dominant chords in first inversion triads. You can use those minor chords in their inversions. So you can really have fun with this and come up with your own chord progressions. Now that this concept is clear, I want to talk about another concept called sub-fives. One big example of hearing this is probably in the blues. Now, all those half-step moving chords that you're hearing, those are sub-fives. Basically, those are dominant chords half-step away from the resolution that you want to go to. For example, if you have a D minor 7 chord or a D minor 9 going to G7, going to C major, we can go D flat 7, half-step resolution, going to C major 7 or C major 9 or any variant of C, right? So you have this half-step resolution. So you can do that with any of these dominant chords. For example, 5 of 2 is A7 to D minor. Can be an E flat 7 to D minor. Aha. Now you have dominant chromatic harmony going on. So that means, I know things are getting a little complex. This is 1, E flat 7, sub 5 of 2, sub 5 of 3, sub 5 of 4, sub 5 of 5, sub 5 of 6. I know, hang on with me. You know, sub 5 of 7, and then back to 1. And sub 5 of 1. Cannot forget that sound, right? Like I said, every dominant chord can have their own related 2. If I see the sub 5 of 2 chord, E flat 7, that actually comes from the key of A flat. Now I have this E flat 7. The related 2 of that E flat 7 is a B flat minor 7 chord. B flat minor 7, E flat 7, D minor 7, G7, C major. Isn't that cool? You can do these related 2s for every chord. Now what you can do is you can mix and match. If you see the Harmonic Universe chart, you can basically mix and match. As you can see, the D minor, G7, A flat, D flat, they have an arrow, an X arrow in between them. That basically means they're interchangeable. You know, if I have a 2, 5 to 1, that can be 2, 5, sub 5 to 1. Or it can be 2 to A flat, D flat to 1. Or it can be 2, sub 5, 2 minor to the related 2 minor of D flat, resolving to C major. Or you can just use the minor chords, A flat minor to C major. Isn't that cool? As you can see, these sub-fives and the use of these half-step resolutions and secondary dominants and related 2s create a very beautiful chromatic harmony that you can use in your playing, not only to reharmonize chords, but to also to improvise on top of things, you know? For example, if I have a 2-5-1 in the key of C, now I can highlight that D flat 7 chord resolving to C major. Check it out, that's what it sounds like. One thing that I haven't covered, it's passing diminished chords. You can have a passing diminished chord in between all of these moving chords inside the key of C major. For example, the 5 of 2, A7, is D minor. If you make that a 5-7 chord with a flat 9, which is A, C sharp, E, G, but instead you make that an A7 with a flat at 9, A, C sharp, G, B flat, you get basically a dominant 7 flat 9 chord. But if you take that root off, you get a diminished chord. You can do that for every chord, secondary dominant that you have in the key. So for example, if you have an A7 chord, that can be a C sharp diminished to D minor. It's just push and pull. If you start understanding that jazz music and all of these chords and harmonies that are used are basically different kinds of push and pull, you will realize that the concepts are actually very simple. All they're trying to do are find chromatic ways to go in and outside of the key, but in a systemized way. Nothing here is random. You can use these diminished chords not only to go up, but also to go down. That gives you the entire harmonic universe of all the chords, their related twos, secondary dominants, their sub-fives. Now you have all these moving harmonies that you can use inside the key of C major. Now, if I was just playing a normal chord progression like 1, 6, 2, 5, let's use our harmonic universe in C to have fun with this. 1. Now I want to go to 6. I can use the 5 of 6. Right? 5 of 2 in diminished. Sub 5 of 5. Sub 5 of 1. Gets pretty complex, huh? Doesn't it? 6, 2, 5, 1. Sounds pretty amazing if you ask me. Suddenly 1, 6, 2, 5 now sounds like 1, 6, 2, 5, back to 1. All these chromatic movements. You can also add all the related twos. 1, 6, 2, 5, back to 1. Now, I don't think you need to use them all, but you can use them at your disposal to create chromatic harmonic motion in any of the places in any jazz standard that you can think of. I hope you like this video, and I understand that this video gets a little too dense. However, I want to demystify jazz and be able to make it accessible for everyone out there. So try out this concept, spend some time with it. I have a course out on Root 7 5th 3rd that you can go and purchase. It is one of my most comprehensive course on coming up with counterpoint and chord melody stuff. I've put it out for a very affordable cost, and this is a concept I use daily as a jazz guitar player. Please like and subscribe to this video. The only way I'm able to get through these is because of your support. If you like it, leave a comment. If you don't like it, still leave a comment. Please keep supporting, and see you in the next one.